Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Unreserved. My name is Kiana, and in today's video we're going to be talking about identity politics. I'm going to start by introducing everyone, and I'll start off with Jasmine.
Hey guys, Jasmine here, age 25. I go by definitely me on Instagram and social media.
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm 23 years old, and I identify as she, her.
Hi, I'm Erica. I'm 23. I go by I am Erica Maria on social media, and I go by she, her.
Hi, my name is Dante. I am 23 years old, and I'm very excited to talk about identity politics.
What's going on? My name is Moose. I'm 23, and you can catch me at Moose Bendago on Insta.
So identity politics is a tendency for people of a particular religion, race, social background, etc. to form exclusive political alliances with the intention of advancing that interest without concern or regard for any larger group or collective. So to set the tone, do you guys feel that at this current moment, countries that are multicultural, for example, Canada, the United States, do you think the social climate is a bit divided, or do you think in general we're a bit united?
I think it's a bit of both, but depending, because you got to look at geography, right? In the metropolitan cities, you have us, we're a mixed group of people. But if you go into pockets of Canada, like I think Prince George or random Medicine Hat, you're going to find predominantly it's Caucasian people or white people that live in those areas, right? So I think even in the US, in certain pockets, like the Midwest, is predominantly a certain group of people, whereas in the metropolitan cities, you have a mixture of people. So it's both like united and divided.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's quite evident that the social climate is divided in a sense, and that's besides the fact of religion, because the United States, for example, is very, very, I'd say Christian predominantly in small cities and in big cities. And the president has never not been religious, right? And they have to swear by the Bible. That's just a part of what the fabric of the country is. However, smaller, less identified groups might find a little bit more struggle to be able to unify with that, because it's not, if you're not Christian, it's like the president doesn't believe in what you say, right? Like almost, even though that's not the case, it just feels like there's a little bit of divide in that sense.
Do you think identity politics is something we should be rallying for or against? The idea of creating special exclusive events for certain groups, does that take away from the concept of unity, I guess is what I'm really asking.
I don't think so. I think that to unify everybody is pretty much impossible, especially when it comes to your identity politics in the sense of religion, beliefs. And for example, if people are atheists and they'll argue with you about your religion, but they believe that the content of your character, as Martin Luther King said, is just, then they're not unified necessarily. However, they can still sit at the same table, so to speak. But I think that we should be fighting for identity politics, because without defining who you are as a person, how far can you go without that everyone just becoming the same thing and not having anything to stand or abide by? It's the same thing as a sports team. It's I fight for this sports team. You can fight for your religion in the same way. Doesn't mean we don't have to be unified and say that we don't love what we love.
I think the key word in that video was enforcement, right? Like pushing an idea or an identity onto someone is not okay. That's where the line gets crossed. But identifying that, there are different types of people. And generally speaking, when people do move to other parts of the world too, they tend to go to what's known to them, right? So you can look at the GTA, for example. We have pockets and communities where predominantly one area is a particular ethnic group versus another area, right? So we're all still unified, but people still find comfort and safety being in spaces where they can relate to their identity, right? But at the same time, it's like he said too, the whole idea of respect and not being negative with it.
Yeah, breaking somebody down for having that.
Yeah.
And I think that also, if you look at specifically having a group where it's just one religion or one race together, it's more the idea of everybody treating each other the same is an awesome idea, but then you have to look at all the systemic issues behind it. So if you have a group, I'm trying to think of how to say this. if you have a group of people together and they're being discriminated against, they have a right to band together because systemically they're already facing those barriers. It's not something that's just going to go away because you want peace.
Yeah, I think the lack of unification comes from when people are acting unjust and trying to be forceful. That's where there's no unity, because they're just trying to force a narrative onto you. But then if you like stop, if the people will unify, if both sides understand that there's a common goal to be had at hand.
Yeah, just something I want to say. I think that's like, because I was just trying to figure out how I would define unity. And I don't think to be unified necessarily means that you believe in the same things or you're all the same. I think like to be unified, it's more about your objectives or your end goal. So you could have someone who's an atheist and someone who's a Christian, and they may not both believe the same thing based on their like spiritual beliefs, but if they're both working towards like creating a society where people can believe and do what they want, to me, I would think that that's a unified society, but it doesn't mean they all have to believe the same thing. And just to the point about like, if you're being discriminated against, you should be able to retreat into your own safe space with people like-minded. To me, I don't think that, like, I understand why people do that. I don't think that that's going to help them, because when you kind of retreat back into a group of people that think like you, all you're doing is like shielding yourself from things that are, I guess, scary to you. And don't like quote me, but in like clinical psychology and in I guess different branches of psychology, you're supposed to expose someone to very small doses of things that traumatize them. Like if you're really scared of something, the treatment isn't to like band together with other people that are scared of that. But it's also not to just thrust yourself into danger. It's to give yourself like micro doses of that and kind of put yourself out there and risk being, you know, scared or whatever. And then that's the only way you could really fight it. But to then like retreat back into somewhere to shield yourself, to me, it doesn't make you stronger. It just, and it's not to say it makes you weaker, but I don't think it makes you stronger.
I'm gonna stick a pin there only because there is like a whole section
go
I have
ahead,
on
go
that,
ahead.
and I want to build on it then. So before I get to that, I'm gonna just read a point. So what I've, from like doing research and stuff, I've realized that some people actually fear having like narrow groups that protect the interests of certain minorities. So that's why systems in place like affirmative action, events where certain people are only allowed, and certain events where certain people are not allowed, people have issues with that, right? So do you think that it's unfair to, like, is it unfair for minorities to be demanding that kind of access? Like
safe spaces specifically?
Well,
do you mean, or?
Yeah, like
I guess
what kind of events? You know?
guess I'll give an example. Like some of the, like even affirmative action, that's the big one that I guess I had as a talking point. People just don't like that. You know, they say there's no benefit to having a diversity quota. They say it's biased. They say that there shouldn't be, you know, in the United States, there was a day where like white people weren't allowed, for example, things like that. Like it just ticks people off because the argument is that you shouldn't have to take away to build on the other side. But it's like, obviously the person being affected does think that's the solution. So I just wanted to know your thoughts.
Back on your quota thing, because I remember when we were
Yeah.
talking about this, my perspective on that is that, for example, for a job, when a job application has, your race or your gender on it, you're already creating a bias. Whether it works in your favor or not, people hire people.
Yeah.
So whoever's hiring, you don't know what their agenda is, right? Number two, when you're applying for a job, you're applying because you have certain skill sets. What does my race or gender have to do with my skill set to complete the job at hand?
Yeah.
How is that relevant, right?
Yeah.
And so, and on the other side of that, I don't want to get hired because I'm a brown girl, because I'm brown. No, I want to get hired because I know I can do the job damn well, because I have the skills. So that's why I don't believe in the whole quota thing.
The reason that I do believe in quotas is because the way I look at it, so I'm extremely privileged to already be, like, I'm a white woman, and I come from a family of people that already kind of have their foot in the door in a way, where like I was able to get education, I went to university, stuff like that. But for a lot of jobs, they're gonna hire people that look like them, or people that have certain qualifications that already set people in a bias based on their race or their religion. So I think that a good part of like a racial quota is because some people, they don't have that foot in the door. So starting off at like a certain position, bringing somebody in, like a brown girl in, maybe nobody else in that girl's family has ever been in this type of corporate position before, and this would be the first experience to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it could be like a good and a bad thing because it could turn performative really quickly. Like a company could just make it seem like, okay, let's get one person from this ethnicity, this, and we'll seem like a diverse team, right? But the ethics and the morals behind that isn't necessarily up to par to, you know, what it really should be. Like,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I like, once again, I understand why people want quotas. Do I agree with it? No. Because if you're trying to build a business, as you said, Jasmine, you should be picking people based on what they can bring to the table. And there are many reasons why that's important, but one that I'll bring up is that when you're a business owner, you have a responsibility to your employees, to your clients, to your vendors, to everyone that you and your business engages with. So you kind of have a responsibility to do everything in your power to make sure that your business can perform properly in the market, or else you're doing a disservice to your clients, your employees who rely on receiving a paycheck every 2 weeks or every month. So if you're not hiring based on people that can actually help you achieve that, and you hire people that aren't as experienced but like fit this diversity quota, and your business goes under, to me that would be an irresponsible business owner, because your job is to support your business. And if you're not doing that and you're just picking people based on other things, and like, to me that's not a smart way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say though is that the thing is, when a lot of people apply for jobs, which is like a very stereotypical thing, is that if your name is like a Mohammed, or like a name that you can't pronounce, they'll like pass over your resume even if you are qualified. So I think in that sense, maybe those things need to be looked over. Because,
would you even want to work at that company?
Well, they do.
You wouldn't have known that though.
They do.
Yeah.
Like some
That's what-
people,
It's not like they're gonna come and say you didn't get it because of that. You're just not gonna get it.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's subconscious. It's not even like a conscious thing of like, oh, this person is Muhammad or whatever. But people are just so used to seeing like a Jeff and a Mark, and then like a random name will come up. They're like, I don't want to read this.
Yeah, and
It's not purposeful. It's literally
or
just.
they're
you
scared
can
of
have like a
saying
pretty
on the
like
phone.
white name, but if you show that, okay, I have my name is Lizanne Colasso. There's been times when I've gone to like interviews and things, and people have said like, oh, I didn't realize you were brown, right? So like, even if you appear to have a white name and then you have, you know, ethnicity, South Asian, I think you're still at an advantage because okay, you can show representation, but at least you're also showing some sort of, I guess, like acculturation there as well.
I just think that's I generally just think that there's just one thing that a lot of companies need to like figure out, because it's also, the other thing is that it's all computer generated. All these companies go through stuff, so it's like people do hire people, but only past like the first 1,000 applicants online, right? So, and I mean, there's obviously ways to hack that and stuff, but that's like one thing where it's like they don't even necessarily have to they have to meet a quota. I don't to your point, I don't believe in that either. But if you're not even going to look at somebody just even because of their name, it's like, all right, there's something that needs to change in that sense, at least.
And I also think that like it's a time issue as well, because I feel like, you know, if you look at how we're classified to, like, I'm first generation Canadian, right? Like my parents didn't come out here to really get jobs in a corporate culture, and they came here to survive. And now if I wanted to go that route, then obviously then that's something that I want to look for, is that's where I can feel inclusive. And so we got to break through these barriers too right now. And so I think it's just how many people are also going to school trying to get these jobs to break these barriers. Because a lot of people are not going in that direction as well too. So we got to look at the numbers in terms of the population. And I think it's just like a lot of like variables that also affect, you know, how a company like portfolio of people looks like.
Yeah, and even with like choosing people just because they were the best candidate, a lot of it goes, like for the business, that's obviously the better choice to choose a better candidate. But then if you look behind some person, their resume may have a degree and then 60 extracurriculars, but another person just has a bunch of jobs because they were trying to get work to survive. So it's like classism comes into it really heavily because a lot of people aren't going to have a lot of those experiences or like even the chances to do any of those things. So they're going to be filtered out anyways when they didn't even have the chance to start.
Yeah.
But then for me, like the problem there isn't really a diversity issue. The problem there is the criteria in which these companies like go off of when they're picking people. So, because I agree with you, like people that, you know, have really good work experience, but for example, they didn't go to like a really prestigious college university. I don't believe that they shouldn't get the job. I don't think that like your post-secondary credentials should be the only like thing that you look at in hiring someone. But then if someone tasked me with coming up with a solution, I wouldn't say the solution to this is hire more Black people or Indian people or whatever. I would say the solution is that this person has a very old-fashioned way of hiring people, and it's been proven that just because you don't have a degree doesn't mean you're going to be a bad like employee. But what should change is what people look for, not to hire more of specific like races, if that makes sense.
No, it
Like
totally makes sense.
it may solve like 20% of the problem, but if you want to solve 80% of it, I'm just using random percentages, I think they should change how they go about hiring people, not just let's hire a bunch of Black people just because we feel sorry for them. I don't think that is going to help anyone. And just really quickly, because I learned this last week, but I can't remember where I saw it, but it was about affirmative action, which is, and I'll just give my own quick explanation of it. It's basically companies having to hire people of certain cultures in order to almost fit a certain quota. And what I was reading had to do with how it's affecting Black people, because I'm pretty sure it's impacted Black people more. So anyways, so what they found was that affirmative action helps Black people that are higher up on the social ladder. So Black people that come from good families, so 2-parent households, their parents make good money, they went to a good school. So Black people that already are doing well, when they get a job because of affirmative action, it helps them because then now they're getting jobs that maybe they could have gotten anyways, but now because they're Black, they're getting it. But Black people that are much further down, it doesn't help them because even when they get the job, they're doing a job that they're not qualified for, and that doesn't benefit them, it doesn't benefit the employer. So it's like affirmative action helps people that are already much higher, but it doesn't do enough to bring people up that are lower. So it's like, you know, is that really how we want to go about hiring people?
I think that leads into what Liz was saying about it being performative, because if that's on the work of the company, right? Like if like, first of all, I don't know. I also don't really agree with the quota thing. Like, if you really were trying to be, I mean, first of all, if your quota is like, say, 10%, then when you get to the 10, do you stop there? You know, are you going beyond? And it's like, you know, within yourself, like, why are you trying to get a diverse group? Are you doing it because it's a law? Are you doing it because you want that in your company? Do you think that having people of different races, genders, everything, like, is that going to benefit your company?
But it gets tricky because, like, think about it this way. In Toronto, right? Okay, if we have a quota thing, well, look at us. How are you going to decide in this situation? It's obviously off a skill set. But if you go to a smaller town where it's one specific ethnic group of people, do you still have a quota? Like, look, where and when is a quota used? And like, I still can't understand and grasp like the whole like idea and purpose behind it.
And I think for a lot of like companies specifically, they don't have, or the way I see it, a lot of companies don't have good intentions in general, because like their goal is to make money. Like they want things
like they're already
quick,
disposable.
fast. You're already like you're just working for them. So
Yeah.
there's a couple of companies, like I could name them on my hands, of companies that I'm like, these people probably do care about their employees. They may actually put effort into looking through resumes or looking into who they hire, but I don't believe that most companies care at all.
And I think they actually, sorry to interrupt, but like also think about it this way, like the whole Black Lives Matter movement, for example. A lot of people put the black square on their Instagram, and then, you know, what happened after that? What was the follow-up? What was the action? I feel like sometimes companies do the same thing. They'll say like, yeah, I'm for the cause, but it's not really. It's only for their own agenda to come
Something
off as,
had to happen
yeah.
first.
Right.
Like,
Everyone had like a colorful background on LinkedIn for every company this
Yeah.
month, but like there's definitely like no gay
And you
people
see it because
hired,
then it'll
right?
be like the day after the month ends,
Yeah.
and like the whole profile changes.
Yeah,
It's just the whole
exactly.
like mask thing, an identity thing, a PR thing, where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, we want to be perceived as a company like this, but like
That's
deep down when you
progressive.
when you look under the layers, it's like it's really not like that. And I've worked for
Yeah.
companies like that too, and I'm
Yeah.
like, you guys are full of shit.
Like even in like the NFL and the MLB, it's a law that you have to interview somebody black for a new head coaching position. So like the same black coaches would just they'd be like, yeah, bro, sorry, like we just got to bring you in here, and they're like, this is ridiculous. Because I'm like one of 5 black coaches, so you have to interview one of us, and they're just like, we have no intention of hiring you, but it's literally just a law, like
we
it's
have
a
to bring you
rule.
to
That's
this
crazy.
point.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like a lot of black coaches got mad at it. I mean, there's benefit obviously because there's been more black coaches now in both leagues, but
And I
For
think
what?
that's where you see the same people getting
yeah,
recycled through.
pretty much.
So then, do you guys think, before I move on, is it worth having organizations that have specific agendas for specific groups, specific minorities, to get them into these places of opportunities, or
Maybe like educate them, like, you know, you can go into an impoverished community of people and try to give them some sort of understanding on the way the corporate world works, or what you need to understand to be, you know, work as an accountant. Like you need your whatever, your licensing, your certificates, like when you go to school, right? Like, because you can go to school for that, but it's like, what else can you do? So I think that would be, I guess, a little bit more is offering, and not even just throwing money at organizations, but literally being like, okay, Facebook is going to go teach Instagram ads to like poor black community in Baltimore. You know, like that's one thing to do.
Yeah, or even like I feel like there's a responsibility on consumers to support brands and companies that you feel are actually going to follow through with these things. And that's the whole like sustainability stuff. Like it's on consumers really to make the impact, because they're not making money if people aren't putting their money out there.
Well, I would say that as like a cis heterosexual, you know, able-bodied person, to know organizations that are supporting people who are not like me and that are like me is also really important, because then for someone who is questioning or trans or whatever it may be, like you at least have somewhere to go to, you know, get the guidance or the help that you need.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And as you guys are saying this, I was trying to think like maybe we should take a step back and say, why do we even need quotas? Is there, because maybe that's like 2 steps ahead, but we haven't looked at what we should be doing before we even get to a quota. So like, why do we need quotas for certain cultures? Maybe it's because there's like the education system in certain communities that are predominantly a certain race. Maybe the education system sucks. And then as you track the problem over the years from when they're like 10 years old to when they're like 25 and they're about to start their career, it's like between 10 and 25, something failed. And now that they're 25, we're putting in these programs to get them hired. So it's like maybe diversity quotas work and they're good, but I think that there should be a deeper analysis as to why we even need that in the first place, and then attack that so that we can reach a point in our society where it's like we don't even need diversity quotas, because people that would normally be for are educated enough and whatever to the point where they don't even need it.
It's like a Band-Aid solution.
It
Or
is.
like,
Yeah.
here's a quick fix. And
Yeah.
then
But there's
obviously, like,
something more, like why are we even doing this now? You know?
Okay. So to pivot, we're going to talk about safe spaces, as you brought it up earlier. So I guess to start off, I mean, I personally can see why a group of women, for example, with shared experiences and issues, they'll like gather to speak about things that, you know, they all can relate and it resonates with them. And so you get into these safe spaces where it's like we're in a safe space to have this open conversation, for example, right? But on the contrary, a lot of people find the idea of safe spaces crippling, kind of what Dante said earlier, which is why I knew you knew this person. It's like they're saying that, you know, having a safe space doesn't make you stronger. It actually just, it's kind of coddling you, because you're only sharing those thoughts with the people that feel the same way, but are you pushing to the people that need to hear it, the people that need to know why you feel this way and how can you no longer feel this way. So what are your thoughts on safe space?
I think that's a step. It's a step to be able to be around to find other people first who resonate with whatever it is you're feeling with, and to actually have the safe space to voice that emotion or experience or whatever it is. And I think once you're able to build that kind of community of people, and know that you're not alone in your experiences, that you might be able to go out and educate others. But I don't think you can, like, at least for myself, I don't think I would have the courage to just automatically have that hard conversation if I don't have that hard conversation with myself and with others who are at least ready to listen.
Yeah, because not everyone's ready to listen, and people are afraid of confrontation. So it's like, for the people who've experienced that, they don't want to go out of their way to like have that conversation with people because they're going to get confronted and maybe yelled at, whatever the case is.
And for a few of the videos I've seen, like where people explain why they think safe spaces are such a bad thing, basically what it seems like, or what I understand, is that, for example, one person's like, okay, well, my parents have gone through worse, so why is it that, you know, they're basically saying it's progress, and it's like, we're getting there, but we're not there. And now there was one stage where, you know, you'd get beat if you were to like voice your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're just getting like a mean tweet, is what I'm quoting the person that said it. And so they're saying, why is it that we as people can't just handle these tinier microaggressions because our parents went through worse, in the hopes of working towards like a goal where, you know, maybe your children or your children's children wouldn't have to go through that. So what do you guys think about that, in the sense of, should we even be waiting like that? Because that's what, basically what I understood is that, you know, like, this is just a part of the stage, like, just go through it, your kids will be better off.
I think that, like, especially with that, because how we were talking about it kind of pulls you back. If you're taking steps forward, you need a safe space, because the amount of trauma that's put on you, if you're taking steps and you don't have anywhere to be comforted in, because a lot of people, when they talk about, like, parents had it a lot worse, then you think about the generational trauma that's been put on those parents because they had it worse. And that's what, like, everybody talks about, like, generational barriers and like breaking trauma and stuff like that. And that can't happen if you don't have a safe space that understands those things that you also went through.
I feel like it invalidates your experiences. Just because somebody had it worse than you doesn't mean that what you're experiencing isn't bad already.
But on the flip side of that, like, if you've experienced trauma, you can't go, you can't seek solutions and answers from the people that are also going through it, because they don't have it themselves either. There has to be a way to, you know, explore it on a deeper level where there's experts that are in the scene that can help. Because if there was answers for it, then we wouldn't be going through it, right? And so I think that we also need to like get out of our own bubble and also talk to other people, because it's not just that certain group's problem, it's everyone's problem, because we're all living in the society together. So like, it's important that we have the right tools and the resources to also support these safe spaces, because those safe spaces can easily turn into very toxic spaces too.
Because there'd be a lot of ganging up on other people, and then if they have that conversation, they'll be like, oh well, we're not like, they won't say this necessarily, but it's like, when I was in that safe space, they didn't say that to me. Like, you're messed up for having that opinion. People are scared. Like, people are scared to say things nowadays, man. Everyone's scared to say something, and no one can have a negative opinion on that. Because if you do, it's like, oh, you're immediately, whatever the case is, bigoted or this or this. That's literally what it is. So, to your point, on the flip side, that safe space can garner a lot of toxicity at the end of the day, because then it's just like, oh, well, like, let's all band together and hate this person because they thought something different, you know?
And that's why empathy is so important, because like, screw all that stuff, but what about on the human level, right? Like, it's deeper than just that too. So I think that the empathy part of it is really important to the conversations that people are having. Like, how are we relating to one another? Someone may have had it worse than me, but how I processed it and how I felt those things was probably at the same degree as them. I don't know. It's obviously subjective, right? However, at the end of the day, empathy and humanity should be at the core of it all.
Which is the thing, though, that a lot of people don't care about things that don't affect them. And that's what it kind of boils back to, because
everything affects everyone.
It's like, but you see, it's like, if it doesn't affect you negatively, or you don't care. And it's like, a lot of people, they post about things that happen in other countries, and like, I mean, even like what happened in Lebanon, and they make a post, but do you like what else do you do? Like you just reshare the post to kind of check it off your list. I support all these things that's going on, but you're unaffected because your country, where you live, didn't get bombed up. You don't have relatives over there, so it's like, I think that's what really lacks is that people, you empathize in the sense of like you feel the pain to some level, but you're not affected. You don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, like, just to your original question about safe spaces, and I guess I already kind of talked about it, but I think, like, for me, one of the main reasons why I don't, like, it's not that I'm against them, but I don't think that it's going to help people, is that if your goal is to be in a safe space to actually heal, I think that that's great, but like, to exclude other races or other people that differ from you out of fear that they might say something that you don't like, I feel like that, like, I understand why people do that, but if their goal is to try and overcome whatever happened to them, I don't think that that's the best way to go about it. And you made a really good point where if something happens to you, you don't go to people that don't have the answers, right? Like, if I have a problem with a test that I'm not prepared for, I'm not going to meet with people that also don't know the answers. I'm going to find people that have taken the test or are really, knowledgeable about the course, and I surround myself with that people. So if people are going to go into safe spaces, I think it should be more of a productive space to help them, because if they are traumatized by something, they should get help and they should surround themselves with people that are going to be supportive. But I from what I've seen, I don't think that they're being productive. I think it's like denying people access to a point where it's kind of racist, in my opinion. Like, to say that, like, I'm making a group where only Black people can go in because someone said something that was racist to me, and no white people or Indian or Asian or whatever people can come in, to me, and you played that clip of Martin Luther King Jr., that to me seems like completely contrary to what he wanted. He didn't want everyone to have their own space, and how you identify yourself, only those people can go in. Because it's like, maybe, I'm Black, someone was racist to me, I want a safe space, but what's to say that, like, an Indian person or a white person or a whatever person didn't also have a racist encounter, and I could obviously learn from them. So to say that, like, only Black people will understand what I feel because I identify as being Black, it might help in some scenarios, but I don't think that that's a good model to go off of to, like, help cure people of their trauma, specifically for, like, racism.
I feel like it kind of goes back to what Liz said, where it's like, I don't think it's like the end goal should be that you stay in that, like, hub and only talk to, like, Black people about Black problems.
But to me, that is ultimately what will happen. And it was the example I gave earlier. If you have some kind of trauma, you shouldn't shield yourself forever from it, right? Because
But
if you
forever,
do
think
that,
about
but for,
it,
like, a little bit.
like, but think about, okay,
but that is what
you know,
safe
think
spaces
about
do.
when you,
is it?
like, have an issue, like, who do you tell first? Like, you probably tell a friend or someone close to you that can empathize with you. You don't just go telling everyone at once. So I think it's like the same thing.
But I think like a big thing is that, like, if you're of a certain race, you're not going to experience the same racism as somebody else also. And then if you look at different groups, like, I guess, so if somebody's trans and they're not going to have the same issue or face the same, like, transphobia as somebody else. And that's just kind of what it is. Like,
Doesn't mean you can't learn something from them.
but it's just not comparable, and nobody else is really going to understand that. So if you have, like, a Black person and a trans person talking, like, their experiences are extremely different, and somebody's maybe way more traumatic and they can't understand that, and they want to be able to talk to somebody else about it.
I think a safe space is meant for representation. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be, okay, we're victims of, generational trauma, this, that. Like, it doesn't always have to be so heavy. I think a safe space can also be like a collective space where women of color or trans people or whoever it is, whatever that organization may be, celebrate one another and do so because they know of, the hardships that they face and they find kinship in that. The experience might not necessarily be the same, but as people of color here, you know, we obviously have similar experiences that we can bounce off of and relate to, and we've created a safe space where, you know, you said you were white, like you're still in this space, and it's still a safe space enough that we're able to have a discussion with you as well, and you're able to share your thoughts and your opinions.
But then, so just to ask you a question, what happens when, because it's in the same way, like if you don't like someone and what they believe, you don't have to talk with them. And I think it's kind of in the same way where if you expand that space, it's like, okay, well, Erica can come into this conversation. Like this conversation wasn't even just meant for people of color, for example, right? And it's like, just if Erica had like some random view, I mean, in real life, this is a video, obviously, like she's not just gonna go, but in real life, you didn't have to like associate with people that
And
you don't agree with.
Like, it's the time when you can learn and correct, like learn and unlearn from each other. So if you said something and we're all like, oh my God, that was racist or whatever, that's the hard conversation that we can have in this safe space with you, if you're open to it, right?
You know, the other thing on that, like, this is the part, like, the conversation where I'm getting at. I think the real root of the problem really is that prejudice part, right? Like, why are we, like, when we meet people, are like, what's your process of, like, judging or characterizing somebody? Like, Martin Luther King said, like, not to be judged by the color of your skin, but the person that you are, your character, right? And I think what it is that because we've been so traumatized to think that, like, if you've been going through racism your whole life, you're going to think that when someone approaches you, they're going to see you in that lens. So you're already creating that scenario in your head, and you're kind of like, in a sense, attracting that in a sense, because now your reality is based off your thoughts, right? And that person may have not necessarily came at you at that angle. However, because your mindset's already in that, like, you know, the way of thinking, it creates further turmoil. And so you keep going through that trauma. And I think it's just the way we see one another. Until we can start seeing one another as human beings primarily, then, you know, we can start to eliminate all these like issues with race and transgender or whatever you characterize yourself as, like whatever you identify as. Who cares? Like, that's the part I don't understand, why we like, how do we move past that point? How do we get to the point?
Accept differences, though.
Exactly, right? And so how do we do that?
By acknowledging them first, I would say, to acknowledge that we are different and that, you know, our experiences are different and how we choose to present ourselves is different. I think then we can realize, okay, at the bottom of all of these differences, we are all still human. Like, that is the center point for all of us. You can identify as whatever the hell you want to identify, but we all, at the end of the day, identify as human. So I think it's...
Some people may not.
Some people may
I
not.
don't know.
Who knows?
They don't. Well, it was a joke. But
Yeah.
some people are like, I'm not human. I'm not identifying.
Well, some people are like that. There are people who are like,
Yeah.
I am a citizen of Earth. I'm not a person. Like, people, it's
You
like,
know,
what?
But I think
But,
it's important.
I mean,
to
a lot
call
of
it
the
out.
other thing is that safe spaces don't necessarily have to do with that stuff, right? Like, they can be with like experiences, like, you know, as and they don't have to be that deep. But I mean, this is deep. But like, you know, sexual assault, for example, it's like there has to be a safe space for that, because it's like, what is the person just going to come out and be like, yeah, like, this is what I trauma, and then how many times has that story happened, and then people will be like, oh, whatever, like, it wasn't that bad, you know, because they don't know what's happened,
There's, like,
right?
different
Or yeah,
intersections of
or
spaces,
on like
so-
a softer note, it's professional athletes. It's like professional athletes, every person is like, you're a millionaire, how could you be depressed? When people and athletes are like, have been depressed, and it's like, for them, it's like, I have no reason to come out and try to tell you guys anything, because I'm clearly gonna get ripped on for it. So they need a safe space to speak, probably with other only millionaires or professional athletes or whatever the case is, because they can only share so much of their trauma without being judged. So then that's when the doors open up and they go, okay, I can tell everybody how I feel and what the case is behind the closed doors, and I don't care anymore what you think. But before all that happens, there's got to be a place to be like, all right, well, like, I can say this now and not be judged just for saying it because whatever, I'm rich and a millionaire.
But to then exclude people, and I think this is like a major point about safe spaces that like we're all kind of overlooking, because it's great and it's productive, but when it reaches a point where you're literally saying in 2020, almost 2021, if you're this race, I don't want you here.
Yeah.
Or if you're this gender, I don't want you here.
Yeah,
or if you're
that's
this,
an issue.
I don't want you here. To me, it's like, have your safe space, but to deny anyone access to something because they're like,
they could have been the person who has caused the trauma.
if
right?
well, but then
So
if it's okay, like if hypothetically somebody called me the N-word, I wouldn't want that person there, not because of their race, but because they're someone that I find to be rude and they were disrespectful to me. And I don't want to hang out with someone that's rude.
Of course.
But to say I don't want that person there, not because they were rude, but because they're
Their
of this
skin
race,
color.
Yeah.
that is literally
But
racist.
that's the
That is
same thing,
segregation.
yeah.
That is
But, like,
ridiculous.
Okay, so you're saying like in 2020, in 2021,
Mm.
but all those things are still prevalent. Like it's not like racism suddenly disappeared and like all these issues are
It's
gone.
not going to though.
I'm
And
not
that's-
saying it's not here. I'm looking at this as like an independent topic, regardless of everything else happening. And if I'm looking at safe spaces for what they are, I could understand it if people, and like one example of a safe space is between like a client and their psychologist. I think that's the right term. Like that's a safe space. Like they can't share anything that you tell them. But the reason why I would support a safe space like that, which it's already a thing, is because you have a trained professional there to help you deal with what's happening. But if I had some trauma and I had two options to heal, one is to sit with other people who had the same traumas, who have absolutely no idea how to heal me, versus sitting with a person that like is trained in this, or even someone that has gone through it and overcame it. To me, like it's not that hard to see which one's productive, and the goal isn't to shield yourself. The goal should be to maybe shield yourself so that you can have productive activities in your safe space that is going to help you heal.
Yeah.
Like the goal is to heal, and you
Heals to
cannot
grow.
I would
heal.
still like disagree
you know.
with you on
Okay.
that, because I do think that, like, even if you're, for example, yesterday I did a shoot with a women of color collective in Durham. Shout out to you guys. And that was a really good experience because not only am I obviously a woman of color, but I got to be part of an initiative that was in a Durham collective. So that itself, I felt like was a safe space because there were people who looked like me, who were interested in the same things as me. And again, it doesn't always have to be something that's like trauma related.
I agree.
And so even if I am facing trauma as a woman of color, being in a safe space with other women in the same area as me and sharing our experiences, just knowing that I'm not alone. I don't necessarily have to take their advice. I don't have to heal from them or whatever it is, but like to know that I can openly discuss something that I'm experiencing as a person of color with these other women, I think is like more important for a first step. And then realizing, okay, so this is a common problem maybe for other women of color, and then go seek the help in a different safe space. I
Well,
think
you
it's
can
not right to categorize all safe spaces as the same level of safe,
Yeah.
because that
Well, I
being
mean,
with your
then, like,
doctor,
this is a
being with a
safe
doctor or
space, so,
psychiatrist is a totally different type of space.
I agree.
And
I
not
agree.
everyone has the access to that kind of space.
And you
right?
can still be healed. You can still be healed by people. Like people in those safe spaces aren't
Yeah.
all like
There's
haven't
working
all-
through it
right?
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
just
it's for
knowing that
example
they're
somebody
working
who's like
together.
somebody who's like gone through it all is in that safe space because they're like I healed and I figured it out
Yeah.
And I
and
want
this
to
is
help.
how I can help you
Yeah.
to that point. Because I agree
Yeah,
with what
yeah.
you're saying. It's
Yeah.
not like it's not neglecting and being like yo we don't want to talk to white people at all.
Yeah.
But
But
it's
that
like,
is what. But I mean,
some
like,
places are
Well,
like
but
that.
that's on
but
the
yeah.
extreme of it, which
Yes.
obviously we
It's extreme. Well, I mean, is it extreme? Because like that is what's happening nowadays. As you said, like only like certain dorms can only have a certain race. Like
yeah.
it may seem extreme, and
Where is
maybe
this
it is.
happening?
Yeah.
This
In
is
the
in
United
the
States.
States,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
But
maybe
safe
this
spaces,
seems
I feel
extreme,
Like that is
but-
still like a
well,
That's a comfort level.
yeah.
but
Mhm.
imagine if
it's
imagine
the same
with
people
like
feel,
all
but
small
it's
creating
girls.
further
But do you-
segregation.
that's
That
what-
Wait,
opposes
just
civil rights.
really
movement.
quickly though. First question I want to ask for that event: were they denying people access based on certain superficial characteristics like race and stuff?
Well, no, like
No.
well, first of all, to actually be a part of it, you know, you had to answer like a couple of questions. The theme of the shoot was the skin I'm in. So it had a lot to do, obviously, with like, you know, your skin color or like how you identify, because it's a women of color collective. But there are people who are also white presenting who can still be at these events. So I think even to say like to automatically base someone off of the color of their skin is wrong. It's more about your ethnicity.
But that is what's happening because it's like, and maybe this isn't every safe space. Like I'm not trying to say that every single safe space out there
Yeah.
is like excluding people based on race. I'm not saying that because I don't believe that's happening.
But there are some. But there are some.
But that is what you kind of start going into, because if someone says like, I don't feel safe because this, Chinese person is here, it's like that's kind of what you're going towards. But one quick thing is that, like, for me to feel safe, it doesn't mean that everyone around me has to be exactly like me. Like, I feel extremely safe around all of you. I don't think anyone, and not like because I think anyone's gonna kill me, but just like I feel completely safe saying my opinions. I'm disagreeing.
You know why? It goes back down to productivity of what's going on in that safe space. You said this before too, because our common goal right now is we're having an open conversation about
we've agreed to
safe
this,
spaces,
like,
identities, and whatever, right? But what it comes back down to is that sometimes people don't know what they're getting themselves into, and it creates that kind of thing, like, now I don't feel safe. So I think that, like, it really comes back down to what the productivity of that safe space is. What is that group promoting? What is that collective doing for the greater good of not just that group, but the whole good of society? Because I think it has to also be bigger than just what you're doing for yourselves, because it has to then translate into something bigger, I believe.
I'm looking at it also as like, so you're saying this is your personal experience, but we're all here because we're people that can talk and are outgoing and can have these discussions with other people, but you have to look at the whole. So many people can't do that, and they're not in that state.
Why can't they? Just out of curiosity.
It honestly could be the way they're brought up. It could be
where you live.
Yeah, like some people
Like,
are
you
introverts,
just-
some people, like I'm an extrovert. I can't tell an introvert like, why are you an introvert? It's just the make of people, the way they're raised, the way they grew up, maybe some trauma. Like, it really could be anything. And a lot of people can't have those discussions with a group of mixed race people.
But if that group of people are open-minded as we are, and maybe they have experiences that if you heard what they had to say, it could provide immense value to you, shouldn't that also be considered?
Yeah, I'm sure they
But
do out
it
there.
doesn't start there like all the time for everyone though, right? Like, that's why it's like steps.
Yeah, and like some people, like I look at myself, I don't really have, like I have anxiety, but I don't really have anxiety when I'm talking to people. Like I could really talk to anybody. But I look at a number of people every single day who don't enjoy having conversations. They don't like talking to people. They feel very uncomfortable with it. They have to plan out what they say before they say it. I don't think about what I say before I say it, which is a whole other problem. But it's just differences in people. So whenever I look at things, I also take into account that I'm a very different set of person than majority of people.
And I think those people would be accepted to like and in most spaces, so to speak. And I know you're talking about like, let's say like like a black women group where it's like if a white guy tried to come in, they'd be like, hell no, right? But let's say that white guy was extremely had been advocating for those rights for so long. Like for example, Serena Williams' husband, who took off who sold all of his Reddit stock and wanted a black person to take in that spot. It's like I'm sure he would be welcomed in that space by proof of what proof of what he's done.
But wait,
same
hold on,
way
really quickly. Sorry, what you just said to me seems like awful, because to say that like you being a white person should be accepted because you did things, it's like you shouldn't have to do anything. You should just like, because it could be performative, as we said. So it's like it shouldn't be based on that.
That's on the
As a token white person here, I will say that I do think it is to a certain extent on white people to make a change or do something. Like that's kind of how
I don't think it's just white people, guys. Look over here in Toronto, for example, right? Like I grew up in Rexdale, mixed with a lot of Indian people, black people, all kinds of races, right? We still have racism in our communities, and we're all colored. Like the issue doesn't just revolve around white people. The problem's in our own communities to begin with. Brown people are racist to brown people.
Same with black people. That's true.
All this thing it comes down to the core of like you. How do you see yourself?
And do you think you're better than other people?
Exactly.
It's really what it comes down to.
And if you're classifying yourself as that, then that's what you're projecting onto the world. And then it goes from there. It literally starts with you. Then it starts with the people in your inner circle. and then it grows from there.
Yeah.
But if you guys are not healing from the root of the problem, and then it's just going to keep growing exponentially.
So just to bring the conversation to a close, I guess one thing I'll ask, because you guys have been kind of, well, it's like Dante again.
No, really.
It's usually like that, but it's okay.
Do you guys think that people can empathize if they don't fully agree? Like in the way
Totally.
that,
Yeah.
you know,
I think
you
that's what's
disagree
happening
that,
here,
say, yeah, like do you think we truly empathize though? Because at the end of the day, if someone's still advocating for, you know, a group that supports only like women of color, do you have a problem with that? Or can you still coexist and like just not be like...
No. Like 80% no, 20% yes. And it's not that I think that like having groups like that is inherently evil, but I always try and look like 10, 15, 20 years in the future. I'm not psychic, but I try to predict if we do this, how is it going to mutate over the years into something else? And is it going to be something better than it was before or worse? And my fear is that the more people like retreat into these groups based on race or culture or whatever, down the line, it's going to reach a point where anyone can say anything offends them, or anyone can say
That's
like,
where we
I
are
don't feel
now, though.
safe. But
it's
don't you
like
think?
I feel like you assume that being a part of like the safe space means that's all you are. Like me being in a group of like, for women of color doesn't mean I don't talk to like non-people of color, or non-women of color. Like
no, I completely understand that, but I think that like there are a lot of people that do look at it that way. Like for example, there are a lot of like black people that hate white people, and they will have groups where they don't want white people to be a part of it.
They have
And
a
then-
reason to, though. You don't think they have a reason to?
I
that
think
way?
But
I
don't-
think everyone has a reason to do everything, but do I think that it's productive to deny a person access to somewhere because of their race?
Yeah.
Regardless of your reason, I think that that's just awful. I don't, because to say that because you have certain like you're a certain race or whatever, to say that because you're this, you must also be that, and therefore you can't come in. Like I would be pissed off if I'm in a group and someone says this is for blacks only and a white person can't come in. That would piss me off. I would be frustrated in the same way. I wouldn't want that to happen to me. So it's like, where do we draw the line? Like, because what if hypothetically you guys are in your own safe spaces based on certain characteristics, and someone else walks in that's different, and someone in that group says, I don't feel safe with that person being here because they are a man, woman, white, black, whatever. Would you guys get up and say, I'm leaving, I don't want to be a part of it? Or would you say, you know what, this person gave a really convincing reason why they don't feel safe. Maybe they meant it genuinely. Like, would you guys support that if you're in that situation, seeing that happen in front of you? Or would you guys protest and say, this isn't okay?
I mean, probably like, I would say that it wouldn't be okay for those people to like want to have that person there. Like literally an extreme, like, because these are like extreme examples. You're talking about race, right? Or like being not let in. Like if you're a group of women that's been sexually harassed, you don't need to want a guy there. Period.
Yeah.
Period.
Why?
But for them,
No, hold on.
so I'll say why. So for them, let's say if all of these women have been sexually harassed by men, and they want to share their trauma with each other.
Okay,
For
in
them,
that regard. Okay.
And yeah. What
Like,
what benefit do
wouldn't-
they have to listen to his
wouldn't
opinion
kill
about
them,
why a
yeah.
man
Well,
might
'cause
harass
I
them?
think it could be used because I
You
think
know?
it's powerful. You know why? Because that, as like your experiences can like educate him.
Yeah, but
now,
he doesn't need to be educated though.
No, like,
It's not about educating
is
him.
not
They
about
want
that
to share
at
their
all.
own traumas,
Yeah.
right? So like having him sit in on the conversation might be helpful for him down the line to be like, wow, I didn't know
Yeah.
women dealt with all these things, but he can sit in that
Perspective.
conversation after the healing of the problem has happened.
And
first.
people are
Because
in
you can't get over
parties.
you can't get
Okay,
to the
so hold
solution
on.
without getting over the problem in the first
So
place.
would it
you know?
matter if the male was a therapist who is experiencing sexual assault trauma that was in the
Oh,
safe
absolutely, but
space?
that-
But
yeah.
it also
Depends
people
on if they
are on
invite
Yes,
different,
yes,
and
yes.
it just shows up. This is not.
Okay, they're not
really
going to be
your-
comfortable,
Yeah.
obviously.
This is
And
not
But
really
but that's
your-
what
It's not
we're,
you're
what we're
denying
saying
him
here.
because he's a male. You're denying him because he just popped up out of the blue.
Yeah,
But you
Yeah.
should also
Yeah.
I do think you can just deny him because he's a male, because some women are going through different stages of their healing journey. Maybe they're not comfortable having
But yeah, that's
a
just
male
like one
there
example.
in that
Yeah.
space.
And
I can
even-
understand that. Like, what I would say is like I would agree with that if a guy showed up and that's the group that's there. I could understand them not wanting him there, but the reason why is so important. If your reason is solely because you're a guy, I don't like. I understand that, but I think like what they should say is, by you being here, it's making it harder for us to heal, and it's reminding us of what we went through.
Yeah, but why? But
So
why is it
therefore-
doing that though?
But
But
Because
that's
he's
the
a
same
guy.
thing
If
about
a white person comes into your group of all black people or colored people, you can say the exact same thing. I'm not ready to have you in this space because of the trauma that I have been faced with because of white people.
And I
Because
feel like
of the
you have
lack
to.
But I feel like that's a
mentality.
blanket statement, because when it goes down to the core of all things, you can't generalize and categorize as all people
Yeah.
being a certain way because of one experience or multiple experiences you've been through your whole life. Because
Yeah.
then you're going to always be living in that trauma. Are we healing from this trauma, or are we going to continue living?
Well, I
in it?
think that the core root of this particularly has to do with race, about like not letting somebody in because of their race, right? Which is a conversation to be had. But I think holistically as safe spaces, I think there is a place for them to a certain degree, and to not allow people, depending on the circumstance. Race is only one arm of that, right? Like I said, like professional athletes being millionaires, like that doesn't, you let anybody's race in, but somebody who's like, let's
That's
say,
the safe space
for them to have, let's let in a fan who likes to rip on millionaire athletes, even though I'm genuinely depressed and been clinically depressed. That doesn't help anybody, right? Even if it's a random person that's walking in, right? But I think to your point, I agree that the race thing might not help at all to just always be like that. But in certain circumstances, it's allowed because of a woman of color or a black people who have had that trauma. In certain circumstances, it's allowed. But to always have a safe space that's like, no, we don't want, never want to have this race ever is so negative
That's
and
counterproductive.
It's counterproductive,
I
exactly.
think also,
And like,
final
if
thoughts?
just to respond to what you said, if it's the circumstance where like the trauma is that severe that like you have a professional there and they say that you were attacked by somebody, and they can say that yes, by having this person here, it is going to trigger something and it's going to be counterproductive to your healing, I could understand that.
Yeah.
But to just, as you said, to throw a blanket statement and say, if you're white, no.
Yeah.
I think to me that like is just too simple and too general. Like, but if you say that, you know what, and this is like one example, but I saw a therapist, they said that like I should distance myself from these people, and you actually have reasons why, then okay. But to just say like,
I think
no.
that,
I
like,
would say if the safe space is for a group of people who are healing from X, Y, and Z, so they don't want X, Y, and Z person there, that's what makes the space safe, right?
But
to exclude
yeah.
that person is the whole reason why you're having this safe space, so you can talk openly and freely and discuss these things, and then maybe go into the world and talk to whoever it is that
But
and
this
a
is-
lot of
yeah,
people
sorry,
may not
go
have
ahead.
Final
any
I know,
thoughts,
I know.
guys.
Sorry,
Final
sorry.
thoughts.
This is good.
I think that like it's good to recognize that safe spaces can be extremely toxic, but also looking like 10 or 15 years in advance, there's things that need help right now. So even though you're constantly looking 10 or 15 years, if people have issues right now, I think that safe spaces are a good idea to help people heal, and obviously it's not your whole life, like you're not
it's part of
only
the
in your safe
journey.
space.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just
I understand.
it's just like a part that you spend like maybe like every 3 weeks with a group of people that are in a similar scenario as you, and I think that can be really healing for people.
I understand.
I think
I'm
that-
actually,
yeah.
I like the points you guys made. It's points I haven't heard before. They're pretty interesting.
I think it's just identifying threats, understanding what feels threatening to you, and then overcoming those fears, overcoming those things, so that you can live a life with healing, So you don't have to live in that burden of being classified as whatever and how society perceives you. And if you need a safe space to do that and to get to that point, then so be it, right? But we got to identify what's being productive here with all of that.
Yeah.
I agree.
think you have to understand like what is racist, like blatantly racist,
Yeah,
and what
yeah.
is actually productive to your healing.
I agree.
All right, cool. So thank you guys for watching another Unreserved episode, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.